Okay, so it's time for some more FIFA. However, you'll be happy to know that it isn't me screwing around in Ultimate Team or anything like that. This is good FIFA. PS1 FIFA. World to World Cup 98, which is still, after almost 20 years, my favourite FIFA. One of my favourite football games, in fact. And one of the most important FIFA games too. This was the one that finally established the game beyond the 16-bit era after a couple of years of serious slumpage. And it's still an awesome game to play now. So let's go have a look at it. Now, a full-on lengthy series on FIFA would perhaps be a bit much, but it is worth looking at the origins of the series as there's a lot of interesting stuff there. You might not know that the original brains behind FIFA belonged to two British freelance designers, Jules Burt and John Law, a man named Jan Tian, a Chinese programmer who emigrated to Canada in 1983 and would head up the programming for the game, and Bruce McMillan, the executive producer who would go on to head up FIFA for the rest of the 90s. It did initially make sense to develop FIFA in Europe. Indeed, the whole reason for FIFA's existence was because EA Europe were pushing for it, as EA Sports Network, as it was at the time's other games, were not big sellers. However, EA's UK studio weren't quite set up to handle development at that point. Believe it or not, they didn't even have a Mega Drive development kit. And so development moved to Vancouver, Canada, where it has stayed ever since. The early development of the game was always somewhat perilous. An American company, a Canadian studio. There were a lot of executives at EA who didn't really give a shit about soccer and didn't expect decent sales. Even with an American World Cup around the corner, and the less said about that the better, it still seemed more like a pastime to many than a full-on sport. American sports was where it was at, and FIFA was hardly on the level of John Madden, PGA Tour or NHL. Hell, at the time the original FIFA was being created, there wasn't even a professional American football league. Major League Soccer wasn't formed until the end of 1993, which as it ended up was also the time that FIFA ended up coming out, pushed forward somewhat in order to avoid competing with US Gold's official World Cup game. Even the acquisition of the FIFA license itself is an amusing story. Why FIFA? It's the governing body of the sport, the arbiters, the rule makers and so on. Not exactly celebrated folk. Basically, it's a bunch of old rich men. Hell, it's probably down to the FIFA game itself that a lot of people even really know who they are. So why use that name? Well, EA assumed that football worked like most American sports do, in which the governing bodies of said American sports, be it the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, or the PGA and so on, also have the rights to the names and likenesses of the players, the teams, the logos and so on. FIFA do not have any of those rights. The individual leagues, associations and teams of each country do. This is why FIFA did not have any real players for the first couple of years, because EA then had to gradually go to all of these leagues and bodies around the world, find out who has the rights that they need, and slowly bring everyone on board. It was a lengthy learning process for both EA and the professional leagues, and something that helped to focus the commercial aspect of the game quite a lot. One upshot of all of this though is that the initial cost of acquiring the FIFA license was next to nothing. If things hadn't gone well on the original game's development, it may well have just been cancelled. The original FIFA team knew that they had a pretty special game. The isometric viewpoint hadn't been seen in football games before, the action was way different and significantly more realistic than any other football game at the time, the animation was a whole different league. But it took a lot for the executives at EA to believe in it, to recognise that the success of the game in Europe would make it all worthwhile. Only 12 people worked on the first FIFA game. Nowadays, well over 10,000 people work on FIFA in some capacity, a core development team of about 100 people, and literally thousands of data researchers and reviewers around the world. Around $50,000 to $100,000 was spent on developing the first FIFA game, another crucial factor in the game's survival, along with its position in Canada away from the direct ties of EA's American mothership. As a point of comparison, FIFA 16 was budgeted at $350 million. You can't really deny how huge the game has become, and with that in mind, the humble beginnings of the series are always pretty surprising. Nowadays, an ESPN poll claims that 34% of Americans became fans of the sport itself through playing FIFA. Basically, FIFA does a hell of a lot more to sell the sport of football around the world than, FIFA does. There were always certain edges FIFA had over the opposition. Any of its competitors, whether they be Gremlin or Konami, just can't hope to match EA's marketing budget. They can't match the licensors. The biggest edge anyone ever had in this department was when Pro Evo had Lionel Messi on the cover, and ultimately EA grabbed him too. Again, it's a long ways removed from the very first FIFA cover star, no less a figure than ex-England, Arsenal and Sampdoria midfielder David Platt. Still, as far as the game itself went, God, FIFA was just terrible early on in the 32-bit era. FIFA 96 still had 2D sprites on a 3D pitch and was generally a miserable experience. It was also the first FIFA game to feature real football players, including Roma attacking midfielder Francesco Totti. Totti is now the only professional footballer from FIFA 96 who is still playing today, and is indeed playable on FIFA 17. FIFA 97 was a step forward, but not by all that much, a ropey effort compared to the competition, games like Actua Soccer and ISS Pro. Although it did introduce the indoor soccer mode, and it also had a song on the soundtrack featuring vocals by the commentator John Motson. Don't believe me?
Brilliant! We've got some funky stuff in the house. It's there! It's in! That is the fattest bottom end I've ever heard.
Gradually though, the pieces were falling into place. If there's one thing that FIFA's always done, it's to take inspiration and motivation from the competition, as well as things like features, of course. FIFA Road to World Cup 98 was clearly a big increase in effort after the lukewarm reaction to 97, and it showed everywhere in the game, even on the cover, which featured a young David Beckham, still on his way to becoming the biggest star in football, despite that upcoming kick on Diego Simeone. You've got a big old opening video featuring that one song by Blur that everyone knows and that all hardcore Blur fans despise, Song 2. No Motti on vocals this time, the rest of the soundtrack features PS1 favourites The Crystal Method, and there's even flybys of the stadium you're going to play in before each match. EA were clearly taking this very seriously. Anyway, why is this game so good? There's many reasons. First off is the simplicity, which is still something I appreciate. FIFA on the PS1 doesn't deal in power bars, instead the shot you do depends on how you press the shoot button. A regular press goes for the top corner, a single tap does a low drive, and a double tap does a lob. Simple enough, and generally it works. Indeed, it almost works too well. Basically, if you get the ball in the area and shoot, you will score most of the time. And crossing the ball, well, if anything that's even more deadly. If you can get a header off, it's a goal. A low cross? Yep, a goal. As a result, just about every match in this game is high scoring. You will almost never play a game here that ends in a no-score draw. Is that realistic? Well, not really. But it is bloody exciting. And that's not to say that the defence is balked. You can charge, you can slide. If worse comes to worse, you can even take their legs off with a vicious tackle, stopping a challenge at the likely cost of a red card. And then of course there's all the tricks, all of which are available to everyone with a few presses of the shoulder buttons. Sidesteps, jump in the tackle, roulettes, rainbow flicks, and of course the almighty dive, which I find almost never works, but hey ho. When you bring all of these things together, goals are just about always satisfying, even when there's lots of them. They usually result in some rather inimitable celebrations. Let's face it, they're a fuck of a lot better than being dabbed on for the millionth time. The next thing about FIFA 98 that I love is the speed. Generally I like my football games to be fast, and in the PS1 era, this was the best. A lot of other football games, including the earlier FIFAs, could be rather slow and cumbersome, but not this. It absolutely speeds along, whether you're on PS1 or PC or whatever, almost like the 32-bit version of Sensible Soccer. From this point on, FIFA games tended to be amongst the quickest around, although FIFA 98 was the only one to get it spot on. The next big game, FIFA 99, was if anything too fast. The speed was a big step forward, because suddenly the game was even leaving ISS in the dust. Next up, all the modes. Road to World Cup 98 has tons of them. The Road to World Cup mode itself is a good thing, because you can take any national team you like from the qualifying stages all the way to the tournament itself and the trophy. It's still a fun mode because you can do stuff in it that you can't really do now. Maybe you really want to take, let's say, Vanuatu or the Cook Islands all the way to glory. Unfortunately, you can't do that in FIFA 17 because they're not in it. but you sure as hell can do it in FIFA 98. There's hundreds of teams, just about every country in the world, and a load of club teams to boot. But of course, when I speak of modes, well, you can't not mention indoor football. Introduced by the previous iteration, the huge gameplay improvements of FIFA 98 make this, well, it's football heaven. Nothing but goals, long goals, short goals, tons of tricks goals, utterly ridiculous goalkeepers screw-up goals, and obviously lots of bouncing the ball off the wall. It isn't indoor football unless you can bounce the ball off the wall every chance you get, after all. As far as the PS1 goes, FIFA 98's presentation is pretty good. It all starts with a bored-sounding Desmond Lynam introduced in proceedings, and then commentary comes from the aforementioned John Motson and the sexist Scotch git Andy Gray. Of course you have to deal with plenty of classic PS1 touches. There's no one actually in the crowd. The players don't actually have eyes. The ball is roughly as big as a player's lower leg. They're all there, and to me they just make the game even better. Much like those silly animations. It all just gets you right there, doesn't it? Okay, you know, probably not. I probably just sound like a one-manager type who misses the good old days and doesn't get this FIFA 17 with its dabbing and skill moves and jostling and finesse and ultimate team and packs. Which isn't true, I love them both in their own way. FIFA 98 doesn't make me think about doing this, mind you. Since the start of FIFA, the philosophy of the series has basically never changed. Indeed, it's the philosophy of EA Sports as a whole, to make the game as realistic as it can possibly be. Obviously this doesn't mean that they're always successful. The way this philosophy generally works is to chuck absolutely everything in a bucket, even if it doesn't always play out logically. Everyone loves the time that EA clearly spent on players' idle animations in FIFA 17, or the realistic way they get up from a tackle and spend 20 minutes complaining to the referee. That's especially brilliant when it happens at the same time the opposing team are bearing down on goal. FIFA 98 doesn't have any of that. It's limited in a more traditional way, doing the best that you can with the processing power available. And it does! Even if the end result isn't a realistic version of football, it's an ideal image. A game where just about every match is exciting, where there's always tons of goals, where players effortlessly show their skills and goalies are left flapping. It's everything that FIFA Street wants to be, only utterly naturally. It was the best game for the time, and still one of the most fun to play now. Regardless of how far the series has gone since then, FIFA 98 is brilliant for other reasons. Both a really good football simulation and just a really frickin' brilliant game. But hey, before we end quickly, we should have a look at the other FIFA 98. Naturally, a Road to World Cup game was going to be followed by a proper World Cup game, and World Cup 98 is it. It's not a lot different from Road to World Cup, but hey ho, it's here and I'm probably not going to get a better chance to look at it, so let's just go for it as a bit of a bonus. First off, well, it is a bit of a piss take, isn't it? This game came out only a few months after Road to World Cup, costs the same price, and actually features a lot less teams. There's only the 32 national teams who are in the World Cup tournament, plus another 8. No club teams. And all the stadiums, because it's World Cup 98, are French stadiums, and there's no indoor one. And yes, as a game it is very similar. It does feature some changes. The controls have been switched so it's easier to access more tricks using the shoulder and face button combos, and this is also the first time that FIFA allows you to switch tactics during play without using a menu. And Andy Gray gets replaced on commentary by
Chris Waddle.
The only other really big feature here is the classic match, which allows you to recreate several World Cup finals. If you think, for example, that actually Argentina should have won the original 1930 final, you can do that here and change the course of history. So long as you win a regular World Cup first, which is bloody annoying. But hey, anything to pad the game out and make it feel like it's actually worth the money. But all that said, it was successful. I don't recall that many people complaining at the time, and World Cup 98 sold very well indeed. And I guess when you think about it, after World Cup USA 94 by US Gold, World Cup Italia 90 on the Mega Drive, and World Cup Carnival in 1986, I guess it's a better effort than all of those, I mean that's for damn sure. And in the end, well, EA had managed to reconfirm themselves as the top dogs in football, certainly from a commercial point of view, but mainly thanks to Road to World Cup, from a critical point of view as well. Bye for now.
guitar player really shreds.
Thanks for watching this video. On the end screen you can see all the usual options such as watching another video, a link to my channel, and also a link to my Patreon account, which is where you can get on the list of the great and the good you see scrolling there. If you follow any of these options then thank you so much. And also don't forget that you can win the bell too. See ya!